Elena Morales, a successful 35-year-old lawyer, lived in a luxurious apartment in the city center. Although she had achieved a high level of professional success, her heart still carried deep scars. She was carefully preparing in front of the mirror for an important day in court when a small velvet box forgotten on the dresser caught her attention as she applied red lipstick. She opened the box with trembling fingers, and an avalanche of memories immediately engulfed her. Elena had discovered 2 years earlier that her fiancé, Ricardo, had betrayed her with her own cousin, Valentina, on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Elena was eager to see Ricardo for the last time before the ceremony that fateful morning. As she walked through the halls of her family's house, she heard laughter coming from the groom's room. Without thinking, she pushed the door open. The man she loved, Ricardo, was in the arms of Valentina. Elena refused to believe the story told by the champagne glasses scattered on the floor. She couldn't scream, and a knot of pain choked her. The surprised and guilty looks of Ricardo and Valentina hit her heart. Ricardo turned pale and tried to approach Elena, while Valentina stammered an excuse. Elena couldn't believe what she was seeing. She ran out of the room, tears streaming down her face as she pulled her wedding dress. Ricardo and Valentina's voices pursued her as she ran down the corridor. She fled with a broken heart. At that moment, all the dreams and hopes she had for the future vanished. 2 years had passed since that day, but the emotional scars had not yet healed. Her little velvet box served as a persistent reminder of the day her life ended. Elena closed the box tightly and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman who looked back was indifferent and determined. She vowed never to let anyone mistreat her that way again. The catalyst for Elena's transformation was the betrayal of Ricardo and Valentina. She evolved from a hopeful young woman in love to one hardened by pain. Elena immersed herself in her career, using her work as a means to rid herself of painful memories. She became a relentless lawyer and earned a reputation for being the best in her field. However, behind the successful facade, Elena still struggled with the scars of her past life. She believed that each case she took, each title she earned, was an attempt to fill the void left by the betrayal. Nevertheless, the pain persisted, regardless of how many victories she achieved. Elena knew the coming day would be difficult as she closed the velvet box and prepared to leave her apartment. However, she was also aware that she was ready to face it with the same determination that had guided her for the past 2 years. The betrayal that changed everything still haunted her mind, but she refused to let it define her future. Elena Morales strode firmly and decisively through the corridors of the renowned law firm Mendonça Associates. Her arrival was heralded by the sound of her heels clicking against the gleaming marble. Young associates stepped aside, intimidated by her imposing appearance and her reputation as an unyielding lawyer. Elena had transformed into a woman of steel, both inside and outside the courtroom. Each day was a battle, and Elena faced them with fierce determination. She donned her emotional armor, hiding the scars of her past and using her successful image as a shield against the pain. Her office reflected her personality. It was organized, efficient, and had no room for distractions. Stacks of carefully arranged documents on her desk showcased her dedication and hard work. Elena's personal issues were even more challenging despite her impeccable appearance. She remained haunted by the memories of Ricardo and Valentina's betrayal, often finding herself reliving those painful moments. But this pain propelled her career forward. Each case she won was a personal victory, a way to show the world and herself that she could overcome any obstacle. But behind the armor of success was a fragile woman. Elena kept her private life closed off, avoiding any intimate relationships that could threaten her heart. She preferred to focus on her work, where she could maintain control and avoid the emotional chaos that once nearly destroyed her. Though her days were long and exhausting, Elena never allowed herself to falter. She knew that perseverance and dedication were essential to her success. Her cases were presented with surgical precision and unwavering confidence, making her a formidable figure in the courtroom. Her colleagues admired her for her ethics and commitment to justice, while her opponents feared her ability to dissect their arguments and expose their weaknesses. Even the strongest woman has moments of weakness. When night fell and the office was empty, Elena allowed herself to feel her pain. She gazed at the city lights through her office window, wondering if she would ever be able to open her heart again. She still felt the sting of betrayal, but she refused to let it affect her. Elena knew her journey was far from over. Each day was a new chance to prove she was stronger than before. She continued fighting both in court and in her personal life, determined not to let the scars of her past hinder her from achieving her goals. Everyone saw the woman of steel due to her resilience and determination, but behind that facade was a woman still struggling to find peace and happiness. Elena walked through the office corridors, preparing for another day filled with challenges. She was aware that with the same determination that had brought her this far, she was ready to face whatever the future held. Nothing could shake the resolve of the woman of steel, who was prepared for anything. Something unexpected happened to Elena Morales in her office on an ordinary day. She froze when she saw a beggar sitting on the ground asking for help. She was shocked when she recognized Ricardo, her ex-fiancé, who had once been the center of her world. He was in tattered clothes and had a disheveled beard, but his eyes still showed despair and regret. Elena experienced a storm of emotions. On one hand, the anger and anguish she still felt over Ricardo's betrayal were present. On the other hand, she felt a flicker of concern and compassion for seeing the man she once loved in such a state of destitution. She was paralyzed and didn't know how to react. Before she could make a decision, a black van screeched to a halt beside Ricardo. 4 muscular men got out of the car and approached. One of them shouted, "Hey, you! It's time to settle your debts!" Ricardo tried to stand up, but his face was pale. He begged for more time, but his pleas were cut short as 2 men grabbed him and dragged him toward the van. "Help me, please!" Ricardo cried, his voice breaking with fear. As Ricardo was forced into the vehicle, Elena heard his screams echoing. Within seconds, the van sped away, taking Ricardo and leaving only the echo of his pleas behind. Elena stood trembling on the sidewalk. The strong and determined woman who once stood in court was replaced by someone frightened and confused. Elena looked around, but the other passers-by seemed oblivious to the scene. She leaned against a lamppost, her legs shaking, her mind flooded with unanswered questions and impossible decisions. Should I do something? Should I call the police? Or should I just turn my back and pretend I saw nothing? Elena returned to her office and, trying to ignore the disturbing encounter, buried herself in the documents of the corporate corruption case she was working on. But the memories tormented her. She remembered Ricardo's words of encouragement, the dreams they shared, and the betrayal that ended it all. By the end of the day, she was exhausted but determined to persevere in her pursuit of justice. The unexpected encounter with Ricardo brought back the wounds Elena thought had healed. Seeing the man she once loved reduced to such a state of despair was a painful reminder of all she had lost. Yet something inside her reignited, a renewed determination to uncover the truth and deliver justice. Elena knew she couldn't ignore what she had witnessed. She had to find out what had happened to Ricardo and why he was in such a dire situation. Therefore, Elena struggled to maintain her composure. Each document she reviewed was an attempt to escape the pain that haunted her, blocking out her memories. Though she knew she had to keep going, the past kept pulling her back. Instead of feeling anger toward Ricardo, she felt compassion for him. Seeing the man she once loved in such a state of misery affected her deeply. At that moment, Elena began to consider a decision. She knew she couldn't ignore what she had witnessed. She needed to find out what had happened to Ricardo and why he was in that situation. However, she was aware that this would mean reopening old wounds and facing feelings she had been trying to avoid for the past 2 years. With a heavy heart, Elena decided to investigate further. She would start by tracking down the men who had taken Ricardo. Her determination to uncover the truth outweighed her fear, despite knowing this would be dangerous. She was making a choice that would reveal the truth about Ricardo and force her to confront her own pain and find a way to move forward. Meanwhile, her assistant Clara noticed something was wrong in the office. "Are you okay, Elena?" she asked, seeing the worried expression on her boss's face. Elena hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's true, Clara. I'm just distracted today. Could you let me be alone for a bit?" Clara nodded and left the office, leaving Elena alone. Though she knew Clara was worried, she couldn't explain what was happening. Not yet. The first thing she needed to do was understand the situation herself. Elena spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but her thoughts kept returning to Ricardo. She wondered where he was now, what those men intended with him, and why he was begging outside her office. The unanswered questions tormented her, but they also made her more determined. When the day ended, Elena was exhausted. She gathered all her documents and left the office. As she walked through the empty corridors, her mind kept dwelling on the encounter with Ricardo. She knew the next steps would be difficult, but she was determined to find out what had truly happened. The search for answers was just beginning, and Elena was prepared to face any obstacle. In the following days, Elena became deeply involved in investigating Ricardo and the men who had taken him. Using her legal knowledge and investigative skills, she began piecing together the puzzle. It wasn't long before she discovered something much larger and more disturbing than she had anticipated. The clues led her to a web of corruption involving powerful and influential people across the city. Examining documents and talking to informants, Elena found that the corruption network was linked to a human trafficking scheme. There were too many coincidences in the dates and names involved to ignore. Though she was treading dangerous ground, her determination to uncover the truth and deliver justice was unwavering. At every step, her loyal assistant Clara was by her side. They worked together to review documents, trace connections, and seek any information that could bring them closer to the truth. Each new discovery seemed to increase the risk. Anonymous threats began to reach them, but it only strengthened Elena's resolve. Reviewing a stack of documents one evening, Elena found a link between the corruption network and the organization that had taken Ricardo. She couldn't trust the names she found in the documents. Politicians, businessmen, and even members of the judiciary were involved. The discovery left her stunned and with a renewed sense of urgency. Elena knew she had to act immediately. She decided it was time to share her findings with someone she could trust. She remembered Rodrigo, a college classmate who now worked in the anti-corruption prosecutor's office. He was known for his honesty and zeal for justice. He was the only person she could turn to for help. With Clara by her side, Elena went to Rodrigo's apartment. They knew they were being watched and cautiously made their way up the stairs. Elena's heart raced as she knocked on the door. Rodrigo was surprised to see Elena when he opened the door. "Rodrigo, we need your help," she said urgently. "We have no one else to turn to. We're dealing with a massive corruption case." Rodrigo quickly closed the door and invited them in. Listening in silence, his face grew more serious with each of Elena and Clara's revelations. Finally, he said, "Elena, this is extremely dangerous. If you're right, we're dealing with one of the largest corruption networks in the country's history." "I know," said Elena. "That's why we need your help. We need security and a way to bring this to justice." Rodrigo got up and paced the room thoughtfully. "I have some contacts in the witness protection unit," he said. "I can get you to a safe location while we prepare the case." Suddenly, the sound of sirens in the distance alerted them. Clara looked out the window. "Several police cars are on the street," she said, fear in her voice. Rodrigo acted quickly. "We need to use the fire escape. I know a place where we can hide for a while." As they prepared to leave, Elena stopped and looked at Rodrigo. "Why are you helping us? You're taking a huge risk." Rodrigo smiled sadly. "Isn't this why we became lawyers? To defend justice at any cost." Hearing these words resonated with Elena, reminding her why she started all this in the first place. Knowing the path ahead would be dangerous, but determined to uncover the truth and seek justice, she followed Rodrigo and Clara to the fire escape with renewed resolve. Amid the intense investigation, Elena received an unexpected visit that would change the course of her quest for justice. One cloudy afternoon, her apartment doorbell rang. Clara was surprised to see who was outside when she opened the door. Valentina, Elena's cousin, stood there, looking despondent. Her eyes reflected fear and exhaustion, as if she were carrying an unbearable burden. Elena quickly stood up from the sofa where she was sitting with documents spread around her. "Valentina, what are you doing here?" she asked, feeling a mixture of surprise and incredulity. The last time she had seen her cousin was when she destroyed her dreams in Ricardo's arms. Valentina entered slowly, looking unsure. Elena, I know I have no right to be here, but I need to talk to you, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Elena watched her cousin, trying to understand what she wanted to say. Despite feeling great pain over the betrayal, there was a part of her that wanted to know what had happened. Finally, Elena crossed her arms and said, "Speak." Valentina took a deep breath before beginning to speak. "I know I made a mistake. I know I ruined your life. But there's something you need to know. You have no idea the extent of what I've been involved in, and I want to make it right." Valentina's words caught Elena's attention. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice firm. Valentina looked around as if expecting someone to appear. "I'm involved in the human trafficking network you're investigating. I've been trapped since I was caught. They've blackmailed and threatened me. But I can't continue living like this. I want to help bring down this organization." Elena was silent, contemplating everything. The anger and distrust persisted, but Valentina's voice seemed sincere. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. Valentina pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Because I have proof. Documents, recordings, everything. I want to help dismantle this network. Can you give me a chance?" Elena looked at her cousin before glancing at the folder. The confusion of her emotions haunted her. Though Valentina seemed remorseful and wanting to do the right thing, the pain of betrayal still lingered. Elena handed the folder to her assistant and said, "Clara, check these documents." Clara nodded and began examining the material. Elena and Valentina stood in silence, the tension between them palpable as Clara reviewed the documents. Finally, Valentina admitted, "I know it's hard to believe me, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. I can't change the past, but I can help change the present." Clara, with a serious expression, looked up from the documents. "Elena, this seems legitimate. There's enough evidence here to implicate several key figures." Elena felt the weight of the decision and sighed. "All right, Valentina. I'll give you a chance. But if this is a trap, I won't hesitate to turn you over to the police." Valentina nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Elena. I promise to help you take down this organization, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness." Elena looked at her cousin, still skeptical, but willing to see where this new alliance would lead. From then on, Valentina joined Elena and Clara's team, working tirelessly to dismantle the trafficking network. Despite the conflicts and painful past, they formed a fragile alliance, united by a common goal, to bring justice and uncover the truth. The road ahead would be filled with risks and challenges, but also discoveries and perhaps redemption. As Elena, Valentina, and Clara dug deeper into their investigation, the threats began to escalate. Anonymous phone calls, threatening messages, and even attempts at personal intimidation became part of their daily lives. With each new discovery, it seemed their enemies were growing more terrified and dangerous. Yet this only strengthened Elena's resolve to uncover the truth. One morning, Clara found an envelope with no return address on her desk when she arrived at the office. Inside was a photo of Elena with a target on her face. The message read, "Stay out of matters that don't concern you." Clara rushed to show it to Elena, who read the message with a grim expression. Trying to stay calm, Elena said, "This means we're on the right track." However, the concern in her eyes was evident to Clara. "We need to be careful," Clara said. "They're willing to do anything to stop us." Elena knew Clara was right. She decided it was time to increase their security and plan their moves even more carefully. Valentina was also instructed to stay vigilant. She was hiding in a safe location. They knew they were dealing with powerful and dangerous people, and any misstep could result in a deadly outcome. Meanwhile, Rodrigo, Elena's friend at the prosecutor's office, was conducting his own part of the investigation. He had managed to gather a group of trusted people to review the documents and prepare the case. Even Rodrigo began to feel the pressure. Despite receiving several veiled threats, he was determined to press on. Elena, Clara, and Valentina spent countless nights working tirelessly. Each new document analyzed and every new connection found brought them closer to dismantling the corruption network. They knew they were dealing with a well-organized group with tentacles throughout the city. One night, while working in her apartment, Elena and Clara heard a noise coming from the hallway. They remained silent, hoping the noise would fade. However, as the door began to open slowly, Elena readied herself to defend them. To their surprise, Valentina appeared, panting and with a look of panic. "We need to get out of here," Valentina said urgently. "They know our location. I've been followed." Elena and Clara exchanged looks and quickly began gathering their most important items. They knew they couldn't take everything, but they needed to ensure the critical evidence was safe. As they hurriedly left the apartment, Elena felt a chill run down her spine. They were being carefully watched. The men following them were determined to prevent them from revealing the truth. They took refuge in a small apartment in the city's suburbs. Though they continued their work there, the tension was high. One night, Clara said to Elena, "Elena, this is getting too dangerous. We need more help. We need to go to the police." "I know," Elena replied with a weary voice. "But we can't trust anyone right now. We need more evidence." Valentina remained silent. "I know where we can find it. They use a charity event as a front. It's happening next month. We can get more information there." Elena knew this could be the turning point. They needed concrete evidence to bring the organization to justice. However, they also knew this meant taking even greater risks. They began planning their approach for the event, aware it would be a unique opportunity to expose the corruption network. The following days were spent in rigorous preparation. They were determined to bring justice and uncover the truth, and were ready to face any adversity. Despite the real and growing threat, Elena, Clara, and Valentina were united and resolute. They were willing to do whatever it took to achieve their goal. They were prepared to face the battle head-on, which was just beginning. Elena knew the Velasco Foundation charity event would be their best chance to gather concrete evidence against the corruption network. Though the plan was risky, they were willing to do anything to expose the truth. Elena, Valentina, and Clara worked tirelessly for weeks to prepare for the big day. On the night of the event, the luxurious hall of the Riviera Hotel was adorned with golden lights and filled with the city's elite. Unaware of what lay ahead, businessmen, politicians, and celebrities mingled, exchanging smiles and toasts. Elena's tense expression contrasted with her elegant black dress. Clara was at her side with hidden recording equipment, while Valentina mingled with the crowd, keeping a watchful eye on everything. In a corner of the hall, Elena spotted Javier Salgado, one of the main suspects and leader of the criminal organization, conversing with a group of men. She knew she needed to get closer to gather important information. She approached him with determination, her heart pounding. "Good evening, Mr. Salgado," she said, trying to appear relaxed. Javier smiled calculatedly at her. "Good evening, Ms. Morales. It's a pleasure to see you here." Elena remained calm and began small talk, attempting to extract any valuable information. As they conversed, Clara discreetly moved closer, ready to capture anything that could serve as evidence. Suddenly, a commotion at the entrance of the hall caught everyone's attention. Ricardo entered, disheveled and bruised. "Help!" he cried, his eyes wild and searching the room for Elena. "Please, Elena!" Chaos erupted. As Javier and his associates tried to flee, security guards rushed to apprehend Ricardo. Seeing an opportunity, Elena ran toward Ricardo, but was intercepted by two men in suits. "Sorry, Ms. Morales, but you're coming with us," one of the men who had previously threatened her said. As she was escorted out of the hall, Elena saw Ricardo being dragged in the opposite direction. Their eyes met briefly, filled with regret. The night Elena had hoped would bring answers only brought more questions, placing her in a more dangerous situation than she had ever imagined. Elena was forced into a dark van, her elegant gown now torn and soiled. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded, her voice steady despite her fear. The men remained silent and expressionless. Through the window, Elena watched the city lights fade, leaving the darkness of the industrial outskirts. The air smelled of rust and sea as the van stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse. They led her inside, where a solitary figure waited in the shadows. "Ms. Morales," a clear voice called out. Javier Salgado stepped into the light, a cold smile contrasting with his hard eyes. "I must admit, you're very persistent, though quite annoying." Elena maintained her composure, honed through years of courtroom battles, reflected in her upright posture and defiant gaze. "Javier, kidnapping a lawyer is not a smart move." He chuckled humorlessly. "And meddling in matters that don't concern you isn't wise either." Another figure emerged from the shadows. Elena's heart raced. It was Ricardo, battered but alive. "Elena," he whispered, his voice laden with remorse and fear. "Carlos here insists you know nothing important, but your recent activities suggest otherwise," Javier continued. Elena looked at Ricardo, a storm of conflicting emotions within her. Compassion, betrayal, and a spark of something she thought had vanished. Measuring each word, Elena said, "I don't know what you're talking about. My research is purely professional and pertains to a corporate fraud case." Javier smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "We'll see if you stick to that story after spending some time here with us." Javier's men approached Elena menacingly. She faced an ethical dilemma: reveal her protective information or remain silent and risk everything for justice. How to deal with Ricardo, the man who had betrayed her? Elena finally made her decision. Despite the fear consuming her inside, she said firmly, "Do what you have to do, Mr. Salgado, but remember the truth always comes out." The night hovered over the warehouse, silently witnessing the imminent trial. With her heart racing but her determination intact, Elena was prepared to face whatever was necessary in her pursuit of justice. After the confrontation in the warehouse, Elena knew she was not only closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. She and Clara continued to work tirelessly, gathering all possible evidence. With Rodrigo's help and his network of contacts, they began developing a plan to finally dismantle the corruption network. The information Valentina provided proved to be crucial. She disclosed details about a charity event used as a front for a major operation by the criminal organization. They knew the following month would be their best opportunity to gather more evidence and expose the involved parties. Elena, Clara, and Valentina spent weeks preparing for the event. They scrutinized every detail, planned every move, and ensured they were ready for any possible scenario. Valentina managed to secure invitations to the event using her old contacts. Meanwhile, Clara and Elena devised a plan to infiltrate and gather information without being noticed. On the night of the event, the Riviera Hotel was more glamorous than ever. Elena and Clara arrived early, dressed elegantly as guests. Valentina was already there, observing and identifying key suspects. They communicated continuously through discreet devices. Elena spotted Javier Salgado among other important figures in the city. She knew she had to get close and try to gather any information that could serve as evidence. She approached him with calculated steps, her heart pounding. "Good evening, Mr. Salgado," she said with a rehearsed smile. Javier greeted her politely, but his eyes were cautious. Clara moved discreetly around the hall, recording conversations and observing everyone's movements. Valentina was prepared to intercept any suspicious communication. Everything was going smoothly until a scream echoed through the hall. Once again, Ricardo was trying to catch Elena's attention. Chaos erupted quickly. Elena confronted Javier as he attempted to escape. "What have you done to Ricardo?" she demanded with a determined voice. Javier tried to flee, but Elena was ready to face him, even knowing it could cost her life. Meanwhile, Clara continued recording everything, trying to capture every word Javier said. Javier smiled cruelly and said, "You don't understand, Elena. Ricardo made his choice. He knew the consequences." Elena's fury boiled over. "Javier, you're finished. We have all the evidence we need. It's only a matter of time before you and everyone else involved are exposed." Javier laughed, a sound devoid of mirth. "We'll see, Ms. Morales. Let's wait and see." Before Javier could do anything, the police, alerted by Rodrigo, stormed the venue. Elena, Clara, and Valentina ensured all the evidence was secure, as Javier and other suspects were arrested. Despite the commotion, the operation was successful. Elena, Clara, and Valentina returned to their safe apartment after Javier's arrest. Though exhausted, they remained composed. Clara smiled wearily and said, "We did it, but this is just the beginning." Elena knew Clara was right. The arrests were only the first step. They now had to ensure the evidence was used to convict all those involved and dismantle the network. "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Elena stated firmly, "but we've come this far. We'll see this through to the end." With Rodrigo organizing the legal efforts and the solid evidence they had gathered, Elena, Clara, and Valentina were ready for what came next. They knew the fight would be long and arduous, but they were more determined than ever to seek justice and uncover the truth. The next phase, with Javier Salgado and other members of the corruption network behind bars, was to ensure all evidence was presented correctly and the guilty were brought to justice. With Rodrigo's full support and his team, Elena, Clara, and Valentina began preparing cases against those involved. The following days were intense. Elena spent hours reviewing documents, preparing testimonies, and coordinating with Rodrigo and the prosecutors. The evidence Valentina had provided, combined with the recordings Clara had made at the charity event, was damning. They had everything they needed to bring down the organization. The public prosecutor's office called a press conference to announce the findings and the actions that would be taken. Though anxious, Elena, Clara, and Valentina knew this was the crucial moment. Rodrigo would be representing the public prosecutor's office. On the day of the press conference, the conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and journalists. The tension was palpable. Rodrigo stepped up to the podium and adjusted the microphone. "We are here today to reveal one of the largest corruption and human trafficking networks in our country's history. The evidence we have gathered is indisputable, and the guilty will be brought to justice." He continued detailing the findings, the involved parties, and the legal actions that would be taken. Each word Rodrigo spoke underscored the severity of the crimes and the authorities' efforts to combat corruption. "I would like to express my gratitude to Ms. Elena Morales and her entire team for their tireless effort and bravery. This wouldn't have been possible without them." Elena felt a mixture of relief and pride. The truth and justice were finally coming to light, but she knew the fight wasn't over. Rodrigo approached her after the conference. "Elena, you've done an incredible job, but now we need to ensure all these people are convicted." "I know," Elena replied. "We're ready for what's next." In the following days, the arrests continued. Politicians, businessmen, and notable figures were handcuffed and interrogated. Elena's mentor, Alejandro Vega, was one of the last to be arrested. Their eyes met briefly as he was taken to the station. As he passed, he murmured, "I'm sorry, Elena. You did the right thing in the end." Elena was present when Alejandro was taken away. She felt a mix of relief and sadness. Though Alejandro had played a significant role in her life, his actions couldn't be ignored. No matter who was involved, justice had to be served. Elena became a public figure, and the case was widely covered by the media. She gave several interviews, always emphasizing the importance of seeking justice and fighting corruption. In one interview, she stated, "This is just the beginning. We must continue to be vigilant and ensure this never happens again." Despite the media spotlight, Elena remained dedicated to her work. She continued collaborating with Rodrigo and his team to prepare for the upcoming trials. Each day was a battle, but she was determined to see it through. Valentina also received a lenient sentence for her cooperation. She went on to work with human rights organizations, helping prevent human trafficking using her experience. She and Elena began to rebuild their relationship, united by a common goal of achieving justice and change. As the convictions came through, they represented victories not just for Elena and her team, but for all the victims of the corruption network. The truth was finally coming to light, and justice was being served. Despite knowing the fight against corruption was ongoing, Elena found a new sense of purpose and meaning in her life. She had fought her demons and challenges to finally reveal the truth. She was transformed by her journey of justice and redemption. She was determined to keep fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Over time, Elena, Valentina, and Clara became well-known figures in the fight against corruption and human trafficking. They received several awards and honors for their work, and their efforts were widely recognized. However, for Elena, the greatest reward was knowing they were making a difference, helping to build a safer and more just world. Though the case had been resolved, the fight continued. Elena, Valentina, and Clara were ready to face any challenge that came their way. They were confident that by working together, they could overcome any adversity. The truth and justice had prevailed, and they were determined to ensure it stayed that way.